Okay, so solutions for the future. Let's go ahead. When we look at solutions for the future, we need to think about the advantages and disadvantages of the various power sources. So hydropower, long-term viability, minimal atmospheric pollution, low cost. The problem is we've taken most of the hydroelectric power sources and they consume a vast amount of land, and as Chuck was pointing out in the beginning of this presentation, that a lot of our dams are aging and they present a risk to the people that live downstream. Coal, availability in near term and relatively low cost are the advantages now. But as we have seen in the future, may not be available, and certainly the impact on the environment and public safety. You read about the accidents. If you look at the coal mining industry as a whole, the number of deaths are much, much higher than a lot of the other industries. Go ahead, next. Natural gas. Plants are relatively inexpensive, quick to build, relatively low cost. Again, availability in the long term, and natural gas is needed for other things than electricity, such as in the chemical industry. Oil, availability in the short term, but price is volatile, relies heavily on foreign imports, lots of environmental impacts, and again, we might not have it around all that long. What did we say, 119 years? Okay, next slide. Solar and wind, good choice for remote and rural areas. Here's this energy density thing I was talking about. You only get about 70 watts per square foot max from solar. So you got to have a lot of land use for moderate demand. That equivalent 1,000 megawatt reactor or plant that supplies 500,000 people, you need 35,000 acres for solar or 150,000 acres for wind. And if you're going to use it for other than intermediate or base load, or requires immense energy storage for intermediate or base load, right? Sun doesn't come out at night. Biomass, good choice for localized use, not feasible for any moderate amount of energy. Next slide. Okay, geothermal, good choice for localized use. As we discussed, heats 65% of the homes in Iceland. It's limited availability. Nuclear fusion, extremely high energy density. The problem is we're never going to get there because it requires temperatures in the range of the sun, and there's not any viable way to use that. Okay, next slide. Nuclear fission. Bill's going to talk quite a bit about this, but the advantage is high energy density, near zero carbon emission, proven safe and reliable for over 40 years, and just zero deaths in the Western world from radiation-related accidents. There were 31 deaths from the Chernobyl accident, and as far as Fukushima, right now there's zero. There's been no deaths, even though 25,000 people plus lost their lives from the tsunami. There have been no deaths from the reactor. You might not really understand that from listening to the news, but that's a fact. Disadvantages: spent nuclear fuel repository, not currently available. In the United States, that was supposed to be Yucca Mountain, and the current administration decided that that wasn't a good idea. It wasn't a technical decision. It was purely a political decision. And we can talk more about that offline. There is a public perception of safety, and waste issues, and Bill will talk more about this. Okay, next slide. So when we're thinking about what are we going to do in the future, we need to think about a few things. And this came out of a book that John gave me, that every second of every day, approximately 1,000 tons of topsoil are lost, 3/4 of an acre of forest land is lost, half acre of arable land becomes a desert, and 1,000 tons of unwanted gases are released into the atmosphere. So we're thinking about future energy needs and being environmentally conscious. We need to keep those facts in mind. Okay. So, clean energy. Clean air, we want low greenhouse gases. And what comes out of these cooling towers of a nuclear power plant? What's coming out of those? Anybody have any idea? It's water vapor, right? It is the back end of the process, the removal of the heat energy in the condensers. So, okay, no greenhouse gases. No emissions causing smog or acid rain. Next slide. Should have clean water. No harmful pollutants. No temperature effects protecting aquatic life. Maintain integrity of coastlines and water sources. Next. Low land use. Habitat interference. Okay, so a bright energy future starts with, what do you think the solutions are for our energy needs? Are we going to need coal in the future? Absolutely, right? There's no choice. Petroleum? Absolutely. Nuclear? Right. Wind, solar, renewables, all of those are going to be important. So let's go ahead. Energy conservation, remember we talked about that moral imperative that we have with other nations in the world? Energy efficiency. Next. Oil and gas are going to be part of the mix, at least for the next 100 years. Clean coal, nuclear, renewables. New technologies, there's things coming online all the time, and we don't know in the next 50 years what's going to be developed that's going to help us solve those energy needs. But some of the things, ground source heat pumps, there's a lot of small modular reactors, small isolated, where instead of a huge power grid, you're supplying more localized power, and there's a lot of research going on there. We need to think about the growing energy demands across the world. National security, where we get our energy from, is it reliable? Are we going to have it? Are we in control? And think about what's the impact on the climate. Okay, next slide. Oh, international cooperation with the energy that we use. That's really important that we as a world approach this for solutions, because places like China that are building a coal plant a week, that impacts our air as well as theirs. Okay, next slide. Okay, what questions do you have?
25% of the air pollution in Los Angeles comes across the Pacific. Comes from China.
Yes?
I had a question, because you said that there was, one of the slides, I might have misread it, that there was not any thermal pollution from nuclear power.
I don't know that I said that. Is it?
It said thermal effects to aquatic life, and so it used aquatic. I think it was specific. There is a thermal pollution from the hot gases, but they're coming out of cooling towers now, or they're going through cooling basins before they're emitted to the environment. So it is a controlled feature of nuclear power plant. So it's,
But there is some
there is
thermal pollution to
yes,
aquatic life.
there's thermal pollution. Not in aquatic life, because they go through cooling lagoons if they're on the ocean or on the lake. But if it doesn't have that, it has to go through cooling tower.
I guess just environmentally, are there concerns relating to aquatic life with that process? And I mean, I'm.
Yeah, we will talk about that a little bit later.
Well, write that down if we don't get to that one in Bill's presentation, and make sure we come back to it. Anything we don't answer right now, maybe at the end we can talk about. So make sure you write your questions down.
Ask again during the risk, because that's a good question.
Yeah.